and welcome to our UUCE Sunday service, beaming into all our homes via Zoom and the internet. Dixie, minimize my screen, please. As always, let us gather our tools for the ringing the bell, our tools, a bell and a chalice. Now, let us begin.
Okay.
Sure. With the sound of the bells, we welcome stranger and friend to a time of peacefulness and mindfulness.
We can do that.
Let them also ring out to celebrate the freedom afforded us by our liberal religious faith and the democracy that shelters it. Jenny Sabol will now perform our welcoming song. Jenny?
Jenny, you're muted.
Unmute.
Still muted.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
I apologize, folks, for the glitches. We rehearsed this and somehow or other, things always get messed up. The theme for our services in September has been balance. The Founding Fathers recognized that an accurate census of the entire population is an essential tool to balancing the competing interests that arise in a democracy. That is why this year, an accurate census is so critical to maintaining balance in this democratic republic we call the United States of America. With this in mind, our opening words come from the visionary Black scholar and founder of the NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois. In light of the turmoil roiling America, they remain felt relevant today. Listen to what he has to say. Now is the time. not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime of the life we share together. Jackson Froman will now perform Stand by Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stone. Think of it as a call for all of us, whether we be native-born Americans or the rest of us later arrivals to these shores, to stand and be counted. Take it away, Jackson.
Stand. In the end, you will still be you. One that's done all the things you set out to do. Stand. There's a cross for you to bear. Things to go through if you're going anywhere. Stand for the things you know are right. It's the truth that makes the truth up so tight. Stand. All the things you want are real. You have you to compete and there is no deal. Stand, stand, oh stand. Stand, stand, yeah, stand. Stand, don't you know that you are free? Well, at least in your mind if you wanna be. Yeah, stand, stand, yeah, stand. Stand, oh stand, yeah, stand. Stand, in the end you will still be you. One that's done all the things you set out to do.
You're muted, Regis.
Let us now individually and as a community light chalices of our faith. We gather this hour as a people of faith with joys and concerns, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. It is now time for our bonds of union. Action Jaggi will recite the children's bond, which also serves as our universal bond of union.
Hello, this is Action. We are Unitarian Universalists of people, open mind, loving heart, and welcoming hands.
Thank you, Action. And now Howard and Janet will recite the Bond of Union, our 1898 Bond of Union.
We unite ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion, as interpreted by the growing thought and the noblest lives of humanity,
believing that we may thereby prove helpful one to another
and promote the cause of truth, righteousness, and love in the world.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Howard. It is now time for a story for all ages. Michele Jaggi will share with us the delightful children's book, Tricking the Tallyman, The Shenanigans of the 1790 Census by Jacqueline Davies. Michele?
Hold on one second. I apologize. My text went away. Jill, are you able to make that come back for me?
I can't share the screen and put it back.
Hold on one second. There we go. Sorry about that. When Phineas Bump rode into the town of Turnbridge, he was heartsick, saddle sore, and down on his luck. Meanwhile, on the other side of her door, Mrs. Pepper called to her children, "Come quick, the terrible tallyman has come to Turnbridge. He is an awful scoundrel sent by the government. He counts every person, and the more people he counts, the more taxes we'll have to pay. And if there's another war, the government will know how many men we have and steal them away to be soldiers." Patience burst into tears. Thomas hid in the toy box, but Boston said, "Don't worry, Ma, I have a plan. We will be the town that tricks the tallyman." The next day, Phineas knocked on Mrs. Pepper's door. Mrs. Pepper offered him the best seat in the house. Phineas turned to Mrs. Pepper. "Madam, your name?" "Sarah Pepper." "Your husband is?" "Alas, gone." "My condolence, Widow Pepper. And how many children have you?" "Not a one." Phineas looked up. "I count by beds." "Oh, but they are not for children," Mrs. Pepper explained. Phineas sighed. "I will mark but one free white female," thus counted. Phineas found similar results at the neighboring houses. He then nailed the results of his tally to the tree in the town center as he sighed to his horse. "Today I have been played for a fool, but tomorrow we'll see who has the last laugh." Just then, Boston Pepper came running home to his mom. "Ma, Ma," he shouted, "I have been to the next town over. It's not for taxes or soldiers he's counting people. It's to figure out how many men we send to the new government." "Carp and cod," exclaimed Mrs. Pepper. "We must trick the tallyman into counting us again." "Don't worry, Ma," said Boston. "I've got a plan." The next morning, Phineas called out, "Citizens of Turnbridge, are the results posted fair and true?" "Not entirely," said Mrs. Pepper. "I think, sir, that you must count again." Mrs. Pepper provided Phineas with new paper, quills, and ink. She even mended his cloak. Well rested and well supplied, Phineas knocked on Mrs. Pepper's door. "Madam," he said, "I have come to count your family." "Of course," said Mrs. Pepper. "Please meet my recently returned husband, and with him my 15 children." 17 souls under one roof, said Phineas. At the Swindle house, Phineas counted a husband, a wife, a brother, his wife, a father, and 22 children. And so this continued at each house Phineas visited. By sunset, Phineas had counted 1,726 people. He nailed the results to the tree. "Citizens and animals of Turnbridge, I have posted the results of my tally. If none disputes them by tomorrow, they shall be declared fair and true." Just then, Boston ran home to his mother. "Ma," he called, "I've been talking to a visitor, and he says the counting is for taxes and soldiers, and for sending men to represent us in government." "Cheese and chowder," said Mrs. Pepper. "Those men who wrote the Constitution sure were clever." Meanwhile, Boston developed a plan. The next morning, Phineas called out, "Citizens of Turnbridge, are the results as posted fair and true?" "Not entirely," said Mrs. Pepper. "I think, sir, that you must count again." Boston pushed his way through the crowd. "Sir, if you will but count us one more time, I shall deliver to you a letter from your wife." "Impossible," declared Phineas. "I promise it," declared Boston. And so Phineas walked from house to house. By evening, he had counted 487 people. He nailed his tally to the tree and called out, "Citizens of Turnbridge, I ask you now, are the results as posted fair and true?" Boston stepped forward. "Fair and true they are, good sir." Then he pulled out a letter from behind his back and handed it to Phineas. "The postal rider came through this morning." Phineas broke the seal on the letter and read his wife's words. "My dear Jenny is well," he said stiffly, "and she sends news. We are to have a child in the spring." A loud huzzah rose up from the town people. "You know," said Boston, I would have given you the letter even if you'd refused to count. And I, young man, would have counted you even without this letter. Then he raised his hand solemnly and said, "For count you I must, and count you I did. And now my job is well and verily done, entirely." The end.
Regis, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Michele. We'll hear more from Michele later. Today, we're going to talk about the 2020 census. One might think that at this late date in the year, there would be no need to address the critical importance of the decennial head count. Yet, because of a confluence of unprecedented circumstances, we do. The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a monkey wrench into the massive project, hobbling on the ground census takers. Even before the pandemic threw a blanket over the nation in March, the current administration threw monkey wrenches into the process in its attempts to curtail the count of documented and undocumented non-citizens. Fortunately, the Supreme Court struck down those moves, but not before they sent shockwaves of fear and distrust of the census throughout the immigrant communities. The Trump administration then issued a bone-chilling directive to exclude undocumented residents living in the country when drawing congressional districts. Just this past Thursday, a federal court blocked that memorandum, saying such action would violate the statute governing congressional apportionment. And last week, a federal court judge ordered the Trump administration to stop winding down the census operations early until a court hearing this Thursday over whether the 2020 count should continue through October. The administration had issued a directive pulling the plug early on all census activities, taking activities by setting a truncated end date of September 30th. 2 days after the judge issued the order, the Census Bureau said in court papers that it's refraining from laying off some census takers and it's restoring some quality control steps. This politicization of the census, while disturbing, is not unique. A recent Associated Press story tells us the census has been targeted by politicians repeatedly since its first nationwide head count in 1790. The reason is obvious. The census determines not only how much federal money each state gets, but also how many congressional seats and electoral college. This time, that federal funding adds up to $1.2 trillion. That's right, trillion with a T. Almost 2 decades ago, former Census Bureau Director Kenneth Pruitt claimed the census was political from the very beginning and remains so. Although the science of measurement is used to complete the tasks as soon as possible, the central purpose of the census remains: to shift power from one set of interests to another. That being said, this year it seems different. According to the AP, some fear that this year, during a time of historic partisan and cultural divides, the scientific task of measuring the country's population is more at risk than ever of being overtaken by politics. Our speaker is in a good position to share with us her in-depth knowledge of the history of the census and the critical importance of this year's count in shaping America's future. Michele Jaggi, is Census Outreach Coordinator for Erie County. Michele graduated from Penn State University with a degree in psychology. Prior to her current position, she worked in the social service field for over 15 years. As the Census Outreach Coordinator for Erie County, Michele has been working to connect Erie community members with information to be prepared and motivated to complete the 2020 census. Outside of work, Michele is a mother to 8-year-old Jackson, whom we just saw, who keeps her busy with an extracurricular activities and the occasional Mario Kart competition. She has attended the UUCE for 3 years, and is active in our RE program. In keeping with our Zoom format, Michelle's talk will be broken up into 3 segments. Michele has helpfully provided us with 2 videos to share between segments. Michele?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Regis. Why the Census Bureau counts. I have been working with the 2020 census for over a year, and one thing I have noticed is there's a general lack of excitement about it. Sure, maybe a few people are into history or like statistics, but overall, the general public is not very excited about the census, despite it being one of the biggest pieces of our democracy. This makes it very difficult to encourage everyone to participate. The truth is, census history is American history, and our data tell the story of our nation. Our country's forefathers recognized the importance of having an accurate count of our population. They saw this as so important, they included it as Article 1, Section 2 in the US Constitution. The first decennial census was in 1790 and carried out by US Marshals on horseback, like Phineas Bump in our story. It took them 9 months to count 3.9 million people. The United States has conducted a census every 10 years since then. The key purpose of this count is apportioning the seats of the US House of Representatives. It is important to remember this also ties the census count to the Electoral College and impacts each state's voice in the national election. Counting everyone living in the United States is no small undertaking and takes a lot of planning on the part of the US Census Bureau. We have come a long way since US Marshals counting people by traveling on horseback. Since 1960, people have had the option to self-respond to the census rather than waiting for an enumerator to come to their door. For the first time this year, everyone has had the option of responding online and via phone, in addition to the paper questionnaires and the face-to-face interview process of the past censuses. The Census Bureau had hoped these convenient methods would increase self-response rates, thus increasing accuracy and cutting down on costs. However, this has not been the case with the 2020 census. In fact, at this time, only 4 states have a higher response rate than they did in 2010, and those rates are only slightly higher. The 2020 census has been fraught with challenges. This started with a proposed citizenship question, which increased skepticism about how census data are used. It has culminated as the United States was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic right as the 2020 census response timeline kicked off. COVID-19 has caused there to be less opportunities for outreach, delayed enumeration, and the threat of a shortened timeline to ensure every person is counted. A resulting undercount would cause a loss of power and money, often in areas which need it the most.
Can one girl in a small town, an architect in a major city, and a suburban high school coach shape the future of the United States? Yes, they can. Because every 10 years, the census gives us that power. You can shape your future by responding to the 2020 census. Where do we need new roads to make our lives easier? Where will new school programs help our children thrive? Where could a new health clinic benefit neighborhoods? The 2020 census will inform these decisions and shape how billions of dollars will be distributed to communities like yours each year. And in 2020, you can respond to the census online, by phone, or by mail. It's easy, safe, and important. Make sure you and everyone you know is counted. Now is the time for you to get involved. Your community needs you. Together, we can educate and excite, inspire and make sure every voice is heard. Together, we can shape our future.
Why we count. So what do these challenges mean here in our area? Census data not only determine the apportionment of congressional seats, but also informs the allocation of $1.5 trillion in federal funding. For each person not counted in the 2020 census, Erie County loses a potential $2,100 per person every year for the next 10 years. This is according to the study Counting for Dollars conducted by George Washington University. That is over $100,000 for a family of 5, which is not counted. This is money which comes back to our area for federally funded programs for housing, education, and health and wellness. It also helps to fund roads, and no one would argue we couldn't use more funding for road repairs in our area. Almost half of the federal funding informed by the Census Bureau comes back to our community for health and wellness. We are currently seeing this as the COVID-19 relief funding in our area has been determined by our 2010 census count. Like many areas, Erie County saw a decrease in self-response rates in 2010, and our community leaders have expressed concern certain groups of people in our area were undercounted. As you can see by comparing these two maps of the city of Erie, the self-response rates decreased in all but 2 of the census tracts between 2000 and 2010. We have seen this trending decline across Erie County since the start of self-response options. Leaders throughout Erie County decided to do something about this and developed Erie County's Complete Count Committee and hired a census outreach coordinator, that's me, to organize their efforts. This was very proactive as Erie County was only one of 2 counties in PA to hire an outreach coordinator. Erie County's Complete Count Committee has focused outreach to groups of people the U.S. Census Bureau has identified as hard to count. This list includes children under 5. It is estimated 2 million children were left off the census in 2010. With young children especially, it is important to remember most will be teenagers before they have another opportunity to be counted. In fact, Action was 8 when he was counted on April 1st. This was his first census and the only one for which he will be a minor. Other hard to count groups include new Americans, immigrants and refugees, English language learners, underrepresented minorities, millennials, and Gen Z. In fact, college students have posed a novel challenge to the 2020 census as they moved away from the schools where they live most of the time and should be counted right before Census Day on April 1st. These college students should still be counted at their school, but in many cases were counted where they returned to their parents' homes. We are seeing an impact of this where the Gannon and Edinburgh students live in particular, as those universities have large off-campus populations. There are many reasons for the lack of responses from these groups, including apathy, fear or mistrust of government. Maybe they came from a place where the census was used against them, or lack of understanding. If these groups are undercounted, not only do we lose money for programs which directly affect them, such as school programs for our young children, Pell Grants for college students, utility benefits for low-income households, we also lose government representation. Since 2000, Pennsylvania has lost 3 congressional seats. We are in range to lose an additional seat based on our 2020 count. It is important to remember this gives our power to someone else and quiets our voice in the presidential election. We can all agree having fair representation and voice in the presidential election is essential to the democratic process.
Every 10 years, the census tells the story of America. That's 328 million of us, and counting. It tells us about newcomers and new arrivals, how we're living, where we're going, and what we're learning. From the time of Thomas Jefferson, the census has tracked growth and change in our country and served as a pillar of our democracy, transcending party and tribe. Including the census in our Constitution marked a turning point in world history. In the hands of kings and emperors, a census had historically been a tool of oppression, a ledger used to confiscate property and conscript soldiers. But the founders flipped that model on its head. Our census was designed to empower the governed, granting us representation and political power based on the population of our communities. Today, census data serves as the basis of a staggering $800 billion in federal disbursements to state and local governments. It is the gold standard of demographic information for businesses, researchers, and government. But with the 2020 census fast approaching, we have a problem. Congressional appropriations have fallen short over the past decade, which will lead to a projected 50% drop in the number of local and regional census offices and a 25% reduction in field staffers. That means many communities are at risk of being undercounted, and the programs serving them underfunded, affecting groups and services all across America. An inaccurate census count has cascading consequences. Regions that are growing won't have fair political representation in Congress and state legislatures. Businesses won't have the data they rely on to expand or find labor. Natural disaster planning and emergency services are compromised. Traffic gets worse. Health programs miss their mark. Funding will drop for public libraries, school lunch programs, and early childhood education. Fair housing and other civil rights laws will be harder to enforce. And public transportation will fail to meet demand. At the same time, we face a technological challenge. The 2020 census is the first that can be completed online. That could make it easier for many people to respond, but only if the technology works. Experts say an online census could be vulnerable to crashes, hackers, and other interference. Another challenge is the current political climate, which has stirred fear in immigrant communities, and a proposed question about citizenship status now being fought by 24 states threatens to scare people away from the count. These are urgent challenges, and we're mobilizing to overcome them. Join us. If we work together, we can ensure a fair and accurate census. Join us and stand up for the count. Stand up to support your neighbors and all the people who call this country home. Stand up to defend fair political representation. Stand up to protect economic opportunity. Stand with us. Stand up for the count.
Thank you. Why you count? Current self-response rates are 72% for Erie County and 64% for the city of Erie. To compare, the average across the U.S. is 66%. Erie County is 1% behind where they finished in 2010, and the city is 6% behind their self-response rate at the end of 2010. While there are enumerators collecting data from households who have not yet responded, there is concern about the accuracy of this process. People may not be as honest when responding directly to a person at their door, or people may not open their doors at all. In the time of COVID, the challenges faced by enumerators is even greater. There are additional concerns about safety. The Census Bureau has had a reduced workforce as people hired on decided the job would pose too much of a health risk. Worst of all, they are working within a compressed time frame, needing to accomplish what they had 3 months to do in 2010 and half that time in 2020. The Census Bureau had initially extended the deadline from July to October while they waited for a request to Congress to extend their deadline for getting the final data to the White House. By August, Congress had not yet agreed to extend the deadline, and the Census Bureau moved their end date back to September 30th to ensure the data would be to the White House by December 31st. Currently, there is a restraining order in place to halt the efforts to wind down the census by September 30th. And on September 17th, the courts will rule on whether to extend the deadline. For now, we must move forward as if the 2020 census will complete in just 2 weeks from now. Without an all hands on deck approach, we risk an undercount of the hard to count populations and will see underrepresentation specifically in urban areas. This will cause areas such as the city of Erie to have less representation and funding. I know I'm speaking to a group of civically minded individuals, and I'm sure most of you have completed your 2020 census, unless it has slipped your mind, in which case, please complete it as soon as possible. And for this, I thank you. As the sole employee of this project, I emphasize I cannot do it alone. In coordinating the efforts of Erie County's Complete Count Committee, I have connected with many of the great agencies, nonprofits, businesses, and other programs in our region to establish a grassroots effort to share important information about the 2020 census. The goal has been to educate and motivate our community members to respond. I encourage you to take part in this grassroots effort. We know the most effective way to encourage someone to complete the census is word of mouth from trusted resources. I encourage you to be a trusted resource. You can do this by sharing information about the 2020 census in conversation with friends and family, by sharing census information on social media. The U.S. Census Bureau has great visual messages which can easily be shared, or by sharing with others information about Erie County's Complete Count Committee's events. Our next event will be at the Booker T. Washington Center on September 23rd and will be a one-stop shop for census completion and voter registration. It is important to share accurate information. For those who are skeptical about how census data are used, they should know all identifying information is kept confidential for 72 years, at which time it is released for the purpose of genealogy research. For those whose primary language is not English, the 2020 census is available in many languages, both online and via phone. This is one area where the new technology has improved the decennial census, as the paper questionnaire is only available in English and Spanish. The Census Bureau also has several informational resources available in many languages. If you need access to any of these items, please let me know. Most importantly, people should know the census is fast, safe, and easy. And just 10 minutes of their time will help shape the future of our community for the next 10 years. As the money does not follow the need, it follows the count. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. For our musical meditation today, I've asked James Pearson to perform Bob Dylan's I Pity the Poor Immigrant. Just as they did with our prelude, Joanne Davis, and Joe Johnson have again combined their talents to provide a dynamic video to complement James' performance. Take this time and the moment of silent meditation to follow to perhaps reflect on what you've seen and heard today, or perhaps to reflect on family and friends in this time of national crisis. You may share your concerns and your joys in the Zoom chat box. The icon is at the bottom center of your screen, or touch *6 on your cell phone. Please do not respond to thoughts expressed by others. James?
Good, unmute yourself.
Thank you, James. It is now time for our joys and concerns to be shared with everyone. Christine Linke will share with you what you have expressed. Christine?
Hi. So the main theme of our joys and concerns today is people's feelings of compassion and empathy for others. People mentioned the fires in California and hurricanes, and thinking of people and especially friends who might be affected by that, and also families who are affected by 9/11. We also had, on a happy note, welcome to a guest of someone who's attending our services for the first time, appreciation for our weather in Erie, and one person who is interested in being a census taker who I would encourage to reach out to Michele. That's it.
Thank you, Christine. And now, as we draw to a close, it is time to extinguish our chalice. And we do so with the words of Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Before we hear our closing words, Michele has provided us with a video of Pacific Islanders singing the praises of all of us, regardless of where we came from or how we got here, as we are all part of the one nation, indivisible, that is the United States of America. Here is This Is Me.
Stranger to the door. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts.
Learn to be ashamed of all my scars.
Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us. For your glory. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send the flag, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out 'cause here I come.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen.
I make no apologies, let me go. This is me.
Halau papai kapai maku. Halau papai kapai muku o hawa e hoki ela I mana ia kalani. O ake I kaulana ai ka honu o hoku o maui e ki kau maha karuna o ka ukiki eki e I hapai ai I ka nui ki no ualawe pio I ka alai nui a hina akala au I a me ka au naki ka holo holo hele o ka la I ka lewa ka ohi ia I ke kaula o pe ape a makawalo kuku ino kaulele I ka uhina a ka po aro na makam o ki a po pakele o mawe I kona manu haina ka puona no ka uri o Hawaii no mawe de tu wa
Round of bullets, it's my skin. Fire away, 'cause today we won't let the shame sink in. We are bursting through us. I know that there's a place for us. For we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, when the sand of blood and drown them out.
I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me.
Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat of drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
This is me.
And I know that I deserve your love. And it's nothing I'm not
Uso samo manu manu ile upema. Ao ilu uese de loto alofa. Samo amore, samo amore.
When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send the flood, gonna drown them out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be, this is me.
Look out, 'cause here I come. Look out, 'cause here I come.
Marching out to the beat I drum.
Beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies.
This is
When the
me.
sharpest words wanna cut me down, oh, gonna cut me down. Send the blood to drown them out. Like glorious. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm not scared. Look out, 'cause here I come. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat of drum. I'm marching on. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. Oh, who I'm meant to be. When the sun of blood gonna drown them out.
This is me.
That was delightful. Our closing words today come from the pioneering social activist Dorothy Day. She says, "People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do." For our postlude this morning, I've asked Jackson to perform Deportee by the great American folk singer and chronicler of the dispossessed, Woody Guthrie. Before Jackson begins, however, a few words of background. Speaking at the 2020 UUA General Assembly, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz talked about the Bracero program between 1942 and 1964, in which 2 million Mexican citizens worked basically as indentured agricultural workers. Meanwhile, the burgeoning agribusiness industry in California recruited more Mexican workers outside the program, without documentation or civil rights, subject to deportation. This is a song about what happened to 28 of those workers. Fresno, California, January 28, 1948, Associated Press. A chartered immigration service plane crashed and burned in West Fresno County this morning, killing 28 Mexican deportees, the crew, and an immigrant guard. The Mexicans were being flown to the deportation center in El Centro, to return to their country. The plane, southbound from Oakland Airport, appeared to explode before it plummeted to the ground. The crew were identified as Frank Atkinson, 32 years old, of Long Beach, the pilot. Mrs. Bobby Atkinson, his wife, 33. His wife. The steward is 28. And Marion Hewing, 33. The guard was Frank E. Chapin of Berkeley. The group also included 28 Mexican nationals who had entered the country illegally.
The crops are all in and the peaches all rotten. The oranges piled in the creosote dumps. They're flying them back to the Mexican border to pay all their money to wade back again. Goodbye, my one, goodbye, Rosalita. Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane, and all they'll call you will be deportees. My father's own father, he waded that river. They took all the money he made in his life. My brothers and sisters, they work in the old church. They rode the big trucks, still laid down and died. Goodbye, my one, goodbye, Rosalita. Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane, and all they will call you will be deportees. The sky plane caught on fire, Los Cañas Canyon. A fireball of lightning shook all our hills. Who are all these friends all scattered like dry leaves? The radio says they're just deportees. Goodbye to my one, goodbye, Rosalita. Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane, and all they will call you are deportees.
Thank you, Jackson. That was so powerful. As you all know, this service is the product of many talented hands and minds, and they deserve to be recognized. First, of course, thank you to Michele Jaggi for her enlightened presentation. As always, a grateful thank you to our talented musicians, Jackson Froman and James Pearson. Thank you to Ginny for the welcoming song, even though I had my hand in her face half the time. I apologize for that. Jackson, James, you are an invaluable asset to every service. A special thank you to Joanne Davis and our hostess, and to our hostess with the mostest, Zoom host and screen share usher, Jill Johnson. You gave our service dynamic images to match the words you have heard. Thank you to Action Jaggi and to Janet and Howard for reciting our bonds of union. It certainly was fun watching action in action. And thank you to our ushers, Clyde Wolper, Annette Krushevitz, and Christine Linke. Finally, I wish to thank all of you for attending today's service. I invite you to attend our service next week. Our pastor, Reverend Christina Church, will celebrate the autumn equinox as a day of international balance. I hope you will be able to join us. Christy, do we have any other announcements?
You took me by surprise, Regis. I didn't know you were going to ask me there. There was one. Tom wanted to let everyone know that the Memory Cafe raised $460 for the Walk for Alzheimer's. So thank you, Tom, for that. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Christine. Now we'll all be sent to our breakout rooms for post-service conversation. Thank you for attending the service.